Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to talk elk cartridges and specifically the minimum caliber or cartridge that I would personally use. So again, this is my personal opinion, and I'm bound to offend some when I say a certain cartridge or caliber is too small for elk. So let's get into it, and please leave a comment on what you think should be the minimum caliber or cartridge for elk. In today's hunting world, hunters are leaning towards more cartridges that have less recoil, that are more efficient, that are usually shorter, that use higher BC bullets, and right now the 6.5 millimeter calibers are quite popular. And so on the far left is a 6.5 Creedmoor. Certainly a lot of people are using that for elk. Then you can step up to the 6.5 PRC, which is going to give you 200 to 300 feet per second more. Now, call me old-fashioned. My personal preference for elk is bigger. My personal preference for elk hunting is this, the 300 Weatherby Magnum. Now again, I'm pretty old school, so I chose the 300 Weatherby Mag as my dedicated elk cartridge. And the bullet of choice that I wanted to use for elk, that I have been using, is a 200 grain Nosler AccuBond. And the performance is quite good. If you can deal with the recoil, I'm pushing this 200 grain bullet at 3,100 feet per second. Really, I just want plenty of power out to 400 yards. And this definitely gives me that. The bullet's going 2,500 feet per second and has over 2,700 foot-pounds of energy in this specific load. So yeah, it's plenty for elk. I believe the two most important things for elk hunting is number one, shot placement. Doesn't matter how huge of a cartridge you have, if you can't hit the broadside of a barn with it, well, you're not going to harvest an elk. And so shot placement is number one. Number two, I believe, is bullet construction. So how well does that bullet perform when it hits the animal? Certainly, these two cartridges have been used to kill elk, and they've done it pretty well. But in my opinion, I think they're a little too light. And so, my official pick for the lightest cartridge and caliber I would use is 270 Winchester. This has been used a lot for elk hunting. The bullets that you can use range from, well, like basically 100 grain up to 160 grain with the partition. If I was going to use this for elk hunting, I would use the 150 grain AccuBond. So why the 270 with the 150 grain? Well, I want to use as heavy as bullet possible for elk, and I feel like the 270 is still giving me decent enough velocity with the 150 grain bullet. Typically maxed out, you're going to see around 2,900 feet per second with the 270 Winchester and the 150 grain bullet. Typical, you're probably going to get 2,800 to 2,900 when hand loading it. A lot of factory ammo is shooting it anywhere from 28 to 2850. So it's decent velocity. You're going to get a bit more than a 6.5 Creedmoor and the 7mm 08 Remington. And my bullet of choice would be the AccuBond. So it's a pretty tough bullet, but it's still going to expand down to, I would say, at least 2,000 feet per second. Nosler says 1,800. And so you're going to get a lot of penetration. Yeah, I think it's the ideal elk bullet. Now, of course, there are outliers. So what do I mean by outliers? Well, there are a lot of 6.5 Magnums that are going to be more powerful, shoot faster, give you more downrange energy than a 270 Winchester. For example, a 6.5 PRC, others to name a few, 264 Winchester Magnum, this big one, the 26 Nosler, and the Weatherby Magnums, all perform a little better than a 270 Winchester, or a lot better when talking about the 6.5 300. So, of course, there's outliers. let's just see what kind of performance you're getting with this 270 Winchester with the 150 grain AccuBond going 2,900 feet per second. Your muzzle energy is a little over 2,800 foot-pounds. Recoil is not bad. You know, it's a little bit below a 30-06, and most shooters are going to be able to handle it. I'm just going to take this out to 400 yards. That's where probably my maximum range would be. And so 400, the bullet's still going fast enough to expand. It's going 2,200 feet per second. And your energy, most experts say you should have around 1,500 foot-pounds or more to kill elk. And this has 1,600 foot-pounds. Now what I want to do next is show how the 270 stacks up against other popular cartridges. So on the far left is a 270 Winchester. Right next to it, 6.5 Creedmoor, then the 7mm 08, then the 308 Winchester, 30-06. And we go down a little smaller to the 6.5 PRC. Then we jump up to the 7mm Remington mag, and lastly the 300 Winchester mag. So we're going to go ahead and look at the ballistics, the velocity of these bullets. We're actually going to compare them all with the same factory ammo from Nosler. And let's just see how they do out at 400 yards. With the 270 Winchester, we're using a 150 grain AccuBond long range. And as I said, these 150 grains are going to be going anywhere from 28 to 29. This one's going 28.50. So that's pretty good for factory ammo. And your energy at 400 yards is even more than the hand-loaded 150 grain AccuBond, so it just shows you how BC can really help you with your energy numbers. So this is almost 1,700 foot-pounds. Pretty darn good. Let's go ahead and look at the 6.5 Creedmoor with a 142 grain AccuBond long range and a muzzle velocity of 2,600 feet per second. And your energy is only 1,337 foot-pounds at 400 yards. So if you're going to use a 6.5 Creedmoor for elk, just know this is not a long distance elk cartridge by any means. I would say 300 and in. 7mm 08 Remington with a 150 AccuBond long range going 27.50. It's got a little bit more power. I would say this is kind of on my edge of, yeah, you could probably use it. My nephew uses 7mm 08 for elk hunting, and it does just fine. So it has 1,491 foot-pounds at 400 yards. So again, I might limit this cartridge range, but it certainly can do it. 308 Winchester. I was actually surprised by this. I definitely would put this on the list of a minimum. And with the 168 AccuBond long range going 27.50, your energy 1635. That's pretty good. I know a lot of people use 308 Winchester, and it definitely can do it. Again, I think your limiting factor is just how far you can take the 308 Winchester out. 30-06 with the same bullet, 168 grain, and it's kind of anemic from Nosler, 2,800 feet per second, and so your energy is only a little bit more at 1,700 foot-pounds. Let's just go back down to a 6.5 PRC, which, funny enough, has about the same powder capacity as a 30-06. With that 142 AccuBond long range going 2,900 feet per second, your energy is, well, basically identical with the 30-06 out to 400 yards. Let's step up to some bigger cartridges. 7mm Remington mag, 168 going 2,880 feet per second. Your energy at 400, 1968. Plenty of power. And then let's get up to the 300 Win mag with a 190 grain going 2,870 feet per second. Your energy is at 2,178 foot-pounds. Now, if you remember in the beginning, I said I use a 300 Weatherby with my hand loads with a 200 grain AccuBond, and I'm getting 2,700 foot-pounds at 400 yards. So it's got a lot of energy and power. Lastly, I know there's a lot of you that will hunt with a 6.5 Creedmoor, 7mm 08, and 308 Winchester for elk, and that's fine. Just know that these cartridges have their limitations, just like the bigger ones. And so none of these three are long distance elk cartridges, so just know that. And most importantly, practice a lot with your cartridge so you're comfortable. And again, shot placement is king. Now, I did say the 270 is for me, is my minimum. What is kind of that do-it-all sweet spot? I think there are three excellent choices for your do-it-all cartridge with not a ton of recoil. Number one, 30-06 Springfield. It's been doing it for over 100 years. I just think it's a darn good elk cartridge. Number two, the 7mm Remington Magnum is a great do-it-all cartridge with not a ton of recoil. And the last one I don't actually have is the new 7mm PRC, which is just a tad bit more powerful than the 7 mag. Let me know what you think of my selection of minimum caliber / cartridge, and hope you enjoyed the video.